In 1999, Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond was already a well-established national figure when she sat down for an interview with Pamela Wallin.
Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafond. She is the first Native judge in Saskatchewan.
Mary Ellen Turpel is also with us.
Turpel-Lafond leapt to national prominence earlier in that decade when she served as constitutional advisor to the Assembly of First Nations during the contentious Charlottetown Accord debates.
So it's going to be very difficult to say exactly what the Native vote is.
The Harvard and Cambridge-educated legal scholar has served as a law professor, a judge, and a children's advocate, and she's received honorary doctorates from 10 Canadian universities.
Over the past decade, she has been the voice of those who cannot be heard, particularly those from Aboriginal communities.
My father's a Cree Indian from Norway House, Manitoba.
What status does that give you?
I'm a Treaty Indian.
93-year-old Joe Keeper, a Cree man from Norway House, knew Turpel-Lafond's father, Billy. They went to school together in the 1930s. Keeper said he'd never heard this claim that Billy was Cree.
He was not an Indian boy, he was a white boy. The first I've ever heard of Billy being Indian is when I've heard it from you.
Turpel-Lafond says her dad was raised by her grandparents, William and Eleanor Turpel, who were both of European ancestry. They moved to Norway House in the late 1920s when Billy's father was hired by Indian Affairs as the local doctor. He served the Indian Hospital and the Indian Residential School.
There was a Dr. Turpel at Norway House when I was just a boy. The Turpels were not Cree. They were white people.
Turpel-Lafond declined an interview with CBC, but in an email she insisted her father is Cree, though she wouldn't say who she thinks his biological parents were. She would only hint at family secrets. Now, CBC reached out to her sister, and she said she thinks that her dad was possibly adopted from a Cree family by her grandparents, or was the product of an affair between her grandpa and a Cree woman. So CBC went hunting for records on its own. It discovered this newspaper announcement, which says William and Eleanor Turpel are Billy's mum and dad. A baptismal record says the same thing.
In that normal way of doing things, as an historian, when you see all these records line up, it would be very hard for me as an historian to not conclude that the boy born in Victoria was, in fact, the son of William and Eleanor Turpel.
Turpel-Lafond also claims to be a Treaty Indian, but CBC has found no evidence to support that claim, and she has declined to provide her status card, or even say if she has one. Indigenous scholars and politicians say there's a growing problem in this country of non-Indigenous people taking away opportunities from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people by improperly claiming Indigenous ancestry. Winona Wheeler says because Turpel-Lafond has had a high-profile career while claiming to be a Treaty Indian, she owes the public some answers.
People have the right to know that, who you're related to. So why wouldn't you be forthcoming about that? If she can't identify her Indigenous lineage, who's to say it even exists?
Turpel-Lafond says CBC's questions about her ancestry are offensive and are an invasion of her privacy. She points out that she's been accepted into her husband's First Nations community, the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation, here in Saskatchewan. And high-profile supporters of Turpel-Lafond, both inside and outside of that community, say if she's been accepted by a First Nations community, that should be good enough for everyone. Jeff Leo, CBC News, Regina.